Charlotte Senna was born on September 4, 2014, in the small American town of Greenfield, New York. Growing up in a large and loving family, she was the middle of three sisters. Charlotte was a lively and cheerful child. She loved playing with friends, spending time with her sisters, and going on nature trips with her parents. Greenfield, with a population of just over 5,000 residents, was surrounded by forests, lakes, and picturesque parks, making it an ideal getaway for Charlotte's family. On September 30, 2023, when Charlotte was 9, her parents, along with some friends, decided to visit a national park located about 11 miles from their home. Charlotte was excited for the trip, planning to go with her friends and bring their bikes for a ride through the park. Upon arrival, the parents set up camp, and soon the kids took off on their bikes. The park had specially designed circular tracks, one of which was conveniently close to their campsite. So Charlotte and her friends chose that track for their ride. They started around 6:15 in the evening, intending to return to camp before dark. After completing a few laps, Charlotte's friends wanted to head back, but she decided to do one more round. Her friends rode back toward the camp while Charlotte went the other way on her bike. Some time later, her parents began to worry because Charlotte should have been back by then. A single lap on that track took no more than 10 minutes, even at a slow pace. However, Charlotte still hadn't returned, and the adults began searching for her. They walked along the circular trail, and around 6:45, they made a distressing discovery. Charlotte's bicycle was found abandoned next to the trail, but the girl was nowhere in sight. Her parents immediately feared the worst, that someone had abducted their daughter. There was no logical reason for the girl to leave her bike in the middle of the path and walk away. For a brief moment, they considered the possibility that something was wrong with the bike, but it soon became clear that wasn't the case. The wheels were intact, and the chain was functioning properly. Fearing the worst, her parents decided to call the police. Officers arrived at the scene roughly 15 minutes later and immediately began searching for Charlotte. The sight of her abandoned bicycle led them to a disheartening conclusion: she was most likely abducted. Still, they couldn't completely rule out the chance that she might be lost in the woods, so they launched a search. The police scoured the entire park and closed it off to visitors. They inspected everyone's vehicles and camps before allowing them to leave. Some individuals wanted to remain and assist in the search, but without proper coordination, it only made the police's work more difficult. They searched through every part of the forest. Initially, the officers concentrated on the area surrounding the circular trail where Charlotte had been riding, but found nothing. They then widened the search to cover the entire park. However, the task turned out to be quite difficult. The park covered around 15 square kilometers. The police requested help from park rangers, the fire department, and the state police to cover the vast area. The FBI also became involved in the investigation, concentrating on identifying a possible abductor. They attempted to collect CCTV footage from every surveillance camera near the park and along the nearby roads. They believed that if Charlotte had indeed been kidnapped, the perpetrator must have driven her away by car. The FBI agents also requested visitor information from the Park Service since all guests had to register and pay before entering the park. Their personal data was stored in a database. However, reviewing this data required time due to the high number of visitors in the park that day. They also obtained data from cellular service providers concerning the location of all phones that had been in the park at the time Charlotte disappeared. Considering that the abductor might have entered the park without registering, the FBI agents aimed to compare the park's visitor data with the phone location data, hoping to identify a suspect. Yet, collecting and processing all this information was a lengthy process. It also relied on approximate phone locations, tracked through cell towers, rather than precise GPS coordinates. The search continued late into the night without producing any results. Early the following morning, officers returned to the park, and the search team expanded. In total, more than 400 people took part in the search for the missing girl. The police also reached out to the public through the media, urging anyone with information about Charlotte's disappearance to come forward. The case quickly drew widespread attention, with the state governor addressing it in a special press conference and expressing support for the family. That same morning, the police activated the Amber Alert system, enabling them to rapidly inform the public about the child's disappearance. They hadn't activated it on the first day to ensure that Charlotte wasn't simply lost within the park. Now, it was almost certain that she had been abducted, as she would have been found by then if that had not been the case. Unfortunately, the searches once again brought no results, and the FBI's efforts to identify the abductor were unsuccessful. By the evening, the police began to realize that the chances of finding Charlotte alive were becoming increasingly slim. The first several hours following a child's abduction are crucial, as during that period, there is a higher chance of finding them alive. However, as the search for Charlotte extended beyond that critical time frame, the statistical likelihood of a positive outcome dropped sharply. Still, both the police and Charlotte's parents refused to give up. Early on the third day, they returned to the park to continue their search. Meanwhile, at around 4:20 in the morning, a man arrived at the Senna family's house in a car. He walked to the mailbox, dropped in a letter, and quickly drove away. A police officer who had been monitoring the house from a distance saw him but did not approach, assuming he might be a family acquaintance offering support to Charlotte's parents. During those days, many people had visited the home, leaving letters and food. However, despite his initial hesitation, the officer found the man suspicious and decided to check the mailbox. Inside was a note that immediately changed the direction of the investigation. It was a letter written by the kidnapper, claiming that he was holding Charlotte and was willing to release her in exchange for $50,000. The letter was promptly sent to the laboratory, where experts began urgent analysis. Soon, they discovered several fingerprints and ran them through the databases, but initially found no matches. Around 2:30 p.m., they made a second attempt, which led to a breakthrough. The fingerprints matched those of a 47-year-old man named Craig Nelson Ross Jr. He had been in the New York State database since 1999 following his arrest for DUI. Ross lived only a few miles away from the Senna family's home, and police quickly moved to that location. However, they encountered a problem. The house at that address had recently been seized due to years of unpaid property taxes. While gathering more information about Ross, police learned that he had been living in a trailer on his mother's property. His mother's home was located about 14 miles from Greenfield. Police swiftly obtained a warrant and dispatched more than 30 officers to the site, supported by a helicopter overhead. They surrounded the trailer, used flash grenades to storm in, and arrested Ross. The man tried to resist but was subdued quickly. At first, there was no sign of the girl, leading officers to suspect she might not be there. They conducted a thorough search of the trailer and checked a locked closet. Beneath a pile of rags, they found Charlotte. She was alive and immediately ran toward her rescuers. She was quickly taken to the hospital for medical evaluation, where doctors confirmed that her life was not in danger. Her family was brought to the hospital right away, where they were reunited with Charlotte, and soon after, she was taken home. Her parents, along with the hundreds of people who had taken part in the search, were overjoyed. It is worth noting that just 10 minutes before Charlotte was found, her mother had experienced a strange premonition. At that moment, she was still in the park, where searches were actively underway. She said she had a strong feeling that her daughter would come home that day, and 10 minutes later, the police informed her of Charlotte's rescue. Meanwhile, detectives detained Ross without bail and brought him in for questioning. Since the case remains ongoing, the police have not released details from the interrogation. However, it appears that Ross did not admit guilt, so the case will proceed to trial. Some information about the suspect and his background has already surfaced. Ross's former girlfriend told reporters that she had obtained a restraining order against him in 2017. At that time, she lived with him, his 12-year-old son, and his 4-year-old daughter in his mother's house. During an argument, he attacked her and tried to strangle her, which led her to contact the police. According to the woman, Ross may have been planning the abduction for several months. She revealed that throughout his life, he had never wanted to work, always seeking ways to depend on others, mainly on his mother, by appealing to her sympathy and claiming he suffered from a serious illness, which led her to continue supporting him. Ross's ex-girlfriend believed he specifically targeted Charlotte's family for a reason. Although her parents belonged to the ordinary middle class, Charlotte's late grandfather had considerable wealth. In 1998, he slipped, sustained a severe injury, and later sued the city, receiving more than $2 million in compensation. Even after more than 2 decades, many residents of Greenfield still remembered this story. The ex-girlfriend said Ross knew about that payout and likely decided to profit from the kidnapping. Considering that Charlotte was abducted from the park after being left unsupervised for only a few minutes, Ross must have been watching her. According to his ex-girlfriend, he could have been observing the family for a long time, learning their habits, and waiting for the right opportunity. Another fact suggested the crime had been premeditated. According to her, several months before the incident, he covered his trailer with a tarp, something he had never done before. Since he kept Charlotte there, this could indicate careful planning. Ross's neighbors also reported unsettling experiences. One woman recalled that Ross had once tried to take her 10-year-old son somewhere, and she had to intervene. Another neighbor stated that his family had always been troubled and that Ross, even as a child, would go door to door asking for food. Later, the police uncovered further details about Ross's criminal background. A year before the assault on his girlfriend, he had been arrested for stalking but faced no serious punishment. Just a month before Charlotte's abduction, he was suspected of sexually assaulting an underage relative, but the case was inexplicably closed. Reporters also interviewed his son, who was an adult by then. He expressed hatred for his father, saying he wished he would die in prison, but refused to provide details. About a month after Ross's arrest, police made a grim announcement. In addition to kidnapping, he was charged with sexually assaulting Charlotte. Apparently, while Ross held the girl in his trailer, he committed terrible acts, though the police have not yet revealed specifics. It is only known that Ross denied guilt regarding the sexual assault charges and plans to defend himself in court. Given that the kidnapped girl was found inside his trailer, it is highly unlikely that he will avoid imprisonment. Besides the fingerprints on the ransom note, investigators also uncovered indirect evidence confirming his involvement. By analyzing phone location data from the park at the time of the abduction, they found that Ross's smartphone was among them. There is little doubt that the man will be sentenced to prison. However, while preparations for the trial continue, detectives are also investigating Ross's possible links to 2 other unresolved cases. In August 2003, 18-year-old Jennifer Hammond was selling magazines in the town of Milton. After finishing her shift, she was supposed to meet her co-workers but never arrived at the meeting point. 6 years later, her remains were discovered near a lake 11 miles from town. Notably, she disappeared just a few hundred yards from the house where Ross had been living at the time. 2 years later, 19-year-old Christina White left a trailer park a mile from Milton and vanished. A year later, her remains were discovered, but the case stayed unsolved. As for Ross, he had been living in that same trailer park during that period. Now, the police are considering his potential connection to those murders, but for now, they either lack evidence or are withholding it for investigative reasons. Regarding Charlotte's case, the trial is scheduled to begin in April 2024. Despite the overwhelming evidence of his guilt, it cannot be ruled out that Ross might be offered a plea deal if he continues to deny responsibility. If you found this case intriguing, make sure to like and subscribe. We upload new crime case videos every night. Stay tuned and brace yourself for what's coming next.